Before going to sleep, I lay on my side on the narrow bed in my attic room and absent-mindedly scrolled through Facebook. I stopped at a community group for mothers in Hartford, where people usually asked for family advice, shared recipes, and complained about problems with their children. I had only meant to browse for a few minutes before putting my phone away, because the next morning I still needed to go to an office supply store and buy extra document folders before leaving for Boston to start my new job. Then, a new post appeared at the top of the page, and my finger froze. My daughter and my son were both accepted into a state civil service program. I don't want my daughter to move away for work. What should I do? Beneath it, a pinned comment contained only one sentence: burn her employment packet. I sat bolt upright, a chill racing down my spine. I could not decide what was more frightening, the person who had offered that advice, or the mother who had pinned it as though she had just found the perfect solution. I read the title again. A daughter and a son had both been hired by a government agency. It was stable work, with health insurance, a pension, and room for advancement. Yet that mother wanted to destroy her daughter's future simply because she did not want her working far from home. I exhaled, shook my head, and told myself that all kinds of people existed in this world. Thank goodness my mother was not like that. At that exact moment, her voice came from outside my door, so gentle it was almost sweet. "Natalie, where did you put your employment folder?" The door opened before I could answer. My mother, Margaret Brooks, stood in the doorway wearing a cream-colored robe and holding my brother's navy blue document folder. Startled, I flipped my phone face down on the mattress so quickly that I looked like someone caught hiding something shameful. "Why are you asking about my folder?" She stepped inside, her expression as calm as still water. The bedside lamp lit the silver strands in her hair and the eyes that had always convinced outsiders she was a devoted, gentle mother. "I just watched a video saying state employment records must never be opened or damaged." She lifted the blue folder in her hand. A mother in the video tore her daughter's background check envelope and made the girl miss orientation. It frightened me, so I took Noah's folder for safekeeping. "Your brother has always been careless. You're more responsible, so I normally wouldn't worry, but this concerns both your futures. Give me yours too. On the day you drive to Boston, I'll return them exactly as they are." I looked at Noah's folder, and then at my mother's face. Everything she said sounded reasonable. The Massachusetts Public Administration Associate Program required candidates to bring a sealed employment packet to orientation. Inside were background check clearance, fingerprint results, medical forms, a notarized university transcript, and the official appointment letter. If the sealed envelope was opened or damaged, the candidate had to request a replacement. That did not automatically mean losing the job, but processing could take weeks, and if the packet was not restored before the deadline, the appointment could be transferred to someone on the reserve list. Noah and I had spent almost a year completing the competitive examination, interview rounds, background checks, and medical screening. We had both received our acceptance notices 4 days earlier. Mom had cried in the kitchen when she heard. She had even baked the apple pie my father used to love and said he would surely be proud of us from heaven. Dad had died in a workplace accident when Noah and I were 10. Mom had worked 2 jobs to raise us alone. Although she had always favored Noah, I had convinced myself it was only because he had been born weaker and was often sick. I was the older twin by exactly 1 minute, so I had been taught from childhood to give way to him. I gave him the larger slice of cake, the new bicycle, the right to choose our high school, and countless other things. But destroying my career? No. My mother could not possibly do something as insane as the woman in that Facebook post. I was about to get up and open my closet when uneasiness rose from the pit of my stomach. There was no obvious reason, It was only the way Mom stood beside my bed, the way her fingers gripped the handle of Noah's folder too tightly, and the way she kept looking toward my closet instead of meeting my eyes. "I'll find it tomorrow and give it to you then." I pulled the blanket higher and pretended to yawn. "I'm too sleepy right now." Mom remained where she was. I closed my eyes and kept my breathing slow and even. The room was so quiet that I could hear the clock on my desk ticking. Nearly half a minute passed before she finally said, "Remember to give it to me tomorrow. Don't forget." The door closed. I waited until the sound of her slippers disappeared at the far end of the hall before sitting up and reopening Facebook. The post had just been updated. "The girl isn't suspicious at all. Tomorrow she'll definitely hand the packet over to me herself. Thank you everyone for the advice." I stared at the words until my eyes burned. No coincidence could be that exact. A mother in the same city, with a son and daughter who had both been accepted into the same kind of program, had just asked the exact location of the packet immediately after pinning the comment that said to burn it. I tapped the poster's profile. There was no profile picture. The name was only a meaningless string of letters and numbers. This post was the account's only content. The location information showed Hartford, Connecticut. My hands began to shake. I scrolled through the comments. Not everyone was cruel. Many people called the mother insane. One wrote, "Do you even deserve to call yourself a mother? If you don't want your daughter, let me adopt her. Do you have any idea how difficult it is to get a stable government job?" Another said, "Favoring a son has limits. This is the girl's entire future." One account asked directly, "Does your son know what you plan to do to his sister? If he knows and still agrees, both of you are terrifying." The poster stayed silent for several minutes before replying. "My son begged me in tears. He said his sister absolutely cannot work at the same agency. She has always been better than him at everything. If they enter the same program, my son will live in her shadow again. He hasn't had one chance to shine in 25 years. Even in the womb, she took more nutrients and was born almost 2 pounds heavier, which is why my son was weak. No matter how successful a daughter becomes, she eventually belongs to another family. Only a successful son will support me. The agency is in Boston, almost a 2-hour drive from home. If she leaves, she may settle there permanently. If she loses the job, she'll have to find work nearby and take care of me, while my son can focus entirely on his career. One action solves 2 problems. I could not continue reading the replies. Tears blurred the screen. Noah and I had been born exactly 1 minute apart. From childhood, simply because I was the sister, caring for him had been treated as my duty. I had skipped senior prom to take him to the emergency room while Mom worked a night shift. I had used wages from my cafe job to buy him a laptop for college. I edited his internship applications, practiced interviews with him, and once drove 3 hours through a snowstorm to pick him up when his old car broke down. Every time Noah had a problem, Mom said, "You're his sister. You're stronger. What does it cost you to help him a little?" On the day we received the acceptance call, Noah had thrown his arms around me in the middle of the living room. "Nat, this is amazing. We'll be together again. When we get to Boston, remember to look out for me. I guess I'll have to rely on you my whole life." I had laughed and ruffled his hair the way I did when we were children. I had no idea that only hours later he would cry and beg Mom to destroy my future. If the program had only selected one person, I might have understood selfish competition, but we had each earned separate positions. My existence did not take Noah's place away. He simply could not stand the thought that other people might continue to value me more highly than him. I still wanted to hold on to one last scrap of hope. I created a new account and commented, "Aren't you afraid that after you burn the packet, your daughter will never forgive you? The response appeared almost immediately. She's soft-hearted. I only have to say it was an accident. Ideally, her brother and I should get lightly burned when the packet catches fire. Once she sees us injured, she'll focus on taking care of us and won't have the energy to blame anyone. I raised her for 25 years. She would never dare abandon me. I read the final sentence 3 times. Each time, another part of my affection for her went cold. Fine. If Mom and Noah saw my softness as a tool, I would show them how completely I could stop being soft. The next morning, I woke at 6. I put my real employment packet in my backpack and quietly left before Mom came downstairs. I drove to a Staples about 10 minutes away and bought 2 navy blue document folders identical to the kind issued by the program, along with 2 plastic name holders. Then I stopped at a small print shop beside the post office and reprinted the outer name cards in the same typeface as the originals. I did not touch the sealed envelopes inside. I only switched the outer folders. My real packet went into the folder labeled Noah Brooks, while Noah's packet went into the folder labeled Natalie Brooks. If Mom truly intended only to safeguard them, the switch would cause no harm. On orientation day, I could put them back in the correct covers within seconds. But if she meant to burn the folder carrying my name, the person who would suffer would be the son she wanted to protect most. When I returned home, the smell of coffee and cinnamon drifted from the kitchen. Mom was making pancakes, something she only did when she was in an unusually good mood. "Where did you go so early?" she asked. "I went for a run and picked up a few things." I smiled. "I'm about to start working, so I need to get used to waking early." She watched the bag on my shoulder longer than usual, but did not ask more. She only reminded me, "Don't forget the employment packet." "I won't." I went upstairs. One glance told me someone had searched the room. I was mildly obsessive about order. My books were always arranged by height, all hangers faced the same way, and my makeup sat precisely along the lines of the tray. Now the desk drawer was nearly an inch open, one coat hung on the wrong hanger, and the document box at the bottom of the closet had been turned around. Fortunately, I had carried the packet with me since the night before. I restored the room, then carried both document folders into Mom's bedroom and placed them on the table by the window. "Mom, mine and Noah's packets are here. Please keep them safe. Don't open them, tear them, or leave them near water or fire. If they disappear, our futures could be ruined." Mom turned around. A loving smile rested on her lips, but something sharp flashed in her eyes and made me shiver. "Don't worry. These are your futures. I would protect them with my life." I looked directly into her eyes. "Good. If I lost this job, I don't think I could go on living." Her gaze trembled. For 1 second, alarm showed clearly before she hid it. She turned back to flip a pancake in the pan. Noah had just entered the kitchen. Hearing my last sentence, he nearly choked on his coffee. "Don't say something that scary, Nat. It's only a job." "So you don't want to go?" He looked down and cut his pancake. "If I passed, of course I have to go. But if a better opportunity came along, I'd still rather start a business. Truly rich people own things. How much can you ever make working for a salary your whole life?" Mom immediately agreed. "I'm starting to regret encouraging you both to take the state examination. A permanent position sounds secure, but there's no freedom. I only want my children close to home, running your own company, still coming back for Sunday dinner every week." I sat between them, chewing tasteless pieces of pancake while they performed as though I were still the naive daughter who believed every explanation. After breakfast, I returned to my room and opened the Post again. The mother had updated it. I got the packet, but my daughter said that if she lost the job, she wouldn't want to live. What should I do? For a moment, I thought she was frightened. Perhaps my words had made her hesitate. Less than a minute later, however, the post was edited. I'm not worried that she'll actually kill herself. She's only making threats. What I want to know is how to make the fire look accidental while giving my son and me minor burns, so she can't blame us. I turned off the screen. My last hope disappeared. 2 days later, on Sunday evening, Mom followed her usual routine. She lit a scented candle on the living room table, made tea, and opened the local newspaper. The 2 employment folders sat on the small table near the fireplace. Noah lounged on the couch looking at his phone, though he kept glancing toward Mom. I sat at the dining table pretending to read a novel. Everything happened exactly as described in the post. Mom stood to get water and deliberately knocked the candle over with her elbow. It fell onto a newspaper she had already arranged beneath the folder labeled Natalie Brooks. The flames spread unnaturally fast, proving the paper had been soaked in something flammable. Mom screamed. Noah rushed forward and threw a thin towel over the fire, but deliberately left his hand near the burning edge long enough to redden his wrist. Mom pressed her palm against the hot corner of the table and cried out in pain. I stood, but I did not run to them as they expected. I took the small fire extinguisher hanging beside the kitchen and sprayed it directly onto the flames. In less than 10 seconds, the fire was out, leaving behind blackened cardboard, curled documents, and the bitter smell of chemicals. Mom dropped to the floor, clutching her hand and sobbing. Natalie, I'm sorry. I only wanted to read the paper. I didn't know the candle would fall. Your packet burned. Noah's eyes also turned red as he held his lightly burned wrist. Nat, don't blame Mom. She didn't mean it. Look, she's hurt. I looked at both of them. If I had not read the Facebook post, I probably would have rushed over to hold Mom, called an ambulance, and forgotten the packet altogether. I would have blamed myself for leaving important papers near a candle, believed it was an accident, and spent the following days desperately running from office to office begging for replacements. But this time, I simply walked to the table, picked up the undamaged folder, unzipped it, and removed the sealed envelope inside. My name, Natalie Brooks, was printed clearly in the upper right corner. I let out a breath and deliberately said loudly, "Thank God, my packet is still here." The room fell silent. Mom stopped crying. Noah stared at the envelope in my hand, then turned toward the ashes on the floor. His face went white. Then, whose packet burned? I bent down and used tongs to pick up a surviving scrap of paper. Several words were still visible. Noah Brooks. "It looks like yours." Noah screamed as though someone had stabbed him. "Mom!" He threw himself toward the charred papers and dug through them with bare hands, despite the hot ash. Mom forgot her fake burn and dropped to her knees to turn over each fragment. They cried and blamed each other. Noah demanded to know why she had not checked more carefully. Mom turned toward me, her eyes full of suspicion. "Did you switch the packets?" I widened my eyes. "Why would I switch them? You were the one keeping both folders. I assumed you had checked the names inside." "The outside had your name on it." Noah pointed at the burned folder. "But my documents were inside. That can't happen by itself." I answered calmly. "The folders are identical. Maybe the Human Resources Office mixed up the outer name cards when they packaged them. Or maybe Mom placed them in the wrong covers. But what's stranger is why only the folder with my name burned. And why, before anyone opened it, were you so certain it was mine?" Noah opened his mouth but could not answer. Mom cut in at once. "It was closer to the candle. It was only an accident." "Then it was a very unfortunate accident." I looked at Noah. "You should call the recruitment commission tomorrow morning and request a replacement. It may take several weeks, but if you explain properly, they might grant an extension. Noah's face flushed. It's easy for you to say, because your packet survived. You did this to me. How did I do anything? I didn't light the candle, put newspaper beneath the folder, or knock the candle over. I looked straight at Mom. The only person who can explain this is her. Noah turned toward her. You said there wouldn't be any mistakes. You told me you had prepared everything. The words escaped before he could stop them. Both of them froze. I raised an eyebrow. Prepared what? Noah immediately lowered his head. Mom stammered that he only meant she had prepared a safe place to store the documents. Their panic confirmed everything I needed to know. Their argument lasted until nearly dawn. Noah blamed Mom for ruining his future. Mom apologized again and again and promised she would find someone to help replace the packet. I locked my bedroom door, backed up screenshots of the Facebook post in 3 separate places, and recorded every sentence they shouted in the hallway. The next morning, Noah called the Personnel Commission. His documents could be reissued, but identity verification and resealing would take at least 6 weeks. The first orientation was only 10 days away. He risked having to wait for the next appointment group the following month, or even being moved to the reserve list. Mom began calling everyone she knew. Eventually, she contacted Richard Hale, a 53-year-old man who had once managed contracts for a background screening company. Richard had no direct authority to replace the packet, but he knew many people in the system and constantly bragged that he could speed up any procedure if people treated him well. I recognized his name because I had heard Mom and her closest friend, Caroline Miller, mention him. Richard had a wife, 2 grown children, and a neighborhood reputation for drinking with women much younger than he was. I also knew the matter was not over because Mom updated her Facebook post again. My son's packet was burned by mistake. My daughter can still take the job. How do I keep her at home? An account named Golden Daisy replied, destroy her reputation, and a government agency won't dare hire her. Find a married man, preferably older and connected to the family. Take photographs that make them look intimate, then send them to his wife and to your daughter's workplace. Once the scandal breaks, she won't have the face to go anywhere. She'll also have trouble marrying and will have no choice but to stay home and care for you. My mother clicked like on the comment. This time, I felt no pain. Only a cold, steady calm remained. She did not only want to destroy my job, she wanted to destroy my reputation, my relationships, and my ability to leave home. In her eyes, I was not a daughter but a walking retirement policy. The more capable I became, the more tightly I had to be restrained, because if I were free, she would no longer be able to control me. I took screenshots of everything and began preparing for the next trap. That afternoon, Mom knocked on my bedroom door wearing a sorrowful expression, as though she were the one who had been hurt most. Noah is falling apart, she said. He hasn't eaten anything since morning. You're his sister. Go talk to him. I remained at my desk, folding clothes for the move to Boston. I told him to call and request replacement documents. There's nothing else I can do. You could give him your orientation slot. My hands stopped. Mom stepped inside, closed the door, and sat on the edge of my bed. You're both entering the same program. If you tell the agency you aren't ready and ask to join a later group, perhaps they'll prioritize Noah's packet. He's a man. He needs a stable job so he can marry and buy a house. You're a woman. Waiting a few months won't affect you. The agency does not take one person's appointment and hand it to someone else. But you could try. No. Mom stared at me as though she could not believe what she had heard. You've changed. You were never this selfish before. I almost laughed. For 25 years, whenever I refused to sacrifice something, She called it selfishness. She had used that word so often that I once believed keeping what belonged to me was a sin. "I haven't taken anything from Noah," I said. "His packet burned while it was in your care. I am not giving up my job to repair the consequences for the two of you." Mom's face hardened. For a moment, all gentleness vanished. "Don't forget who raised you." "I have never forgotten, but raising me does not give you the right to decide my entire life." She shot to her feet. "You'll regret this." The door slammed hard enough to rattle the framed picture on the wall. I watched her leave, more certain than ever that the next plan had already begun. That evening, the Golden Daisy account continued advising my mother. The instructions were very specific. Invite Richard to the house under the pretext of discussing Noah's packet, make me dress attractively, encourage me to drink, and then take photographs that could easily be misinterpreted. If they could get me alone with him in a bedroom, the story would be even more convincing. Afterward, Mom only had to send the photographs to Richard's wife, to my agency supervisors, and post them online as a heartbroken mother whose daughter lived recklessly. I read every word as though I were watching strangers discuss how to kill an animal. None of them spoke of me as a person. I was only the girl, her, the daughter who must be kept at home. I created another anonymous account, called it Practical Mom, and replied beneath Golden Daisy's comment, "Alcohol alone may not work. If she stays alert, she can resist and say she was forced. You need something that makes her lose control while still appearing willing." I stared at the screen for a long time before pressing post. I did not do it because I truly wanted Mom to buy drugs. I wanted to know whether she had one final limit. Burning my packet had been cruel. Staging compromising photographs with a married man was worse. But personally drugging her own daughter's drink was a line I still could not believe she would cross. Mom's account replied 10 minutes later, "Is there anything easy to obtain?" Practical Mom wrote, "Crushed prescription sleeping pills or sedatives would work, but be careful with the dosage." I closed my eyes. My heart still hurt, even though I had thought there was nothing left for her to take from me. The next morning, Mom said she was going to the pharmacy to pick up medicine for insomnia. She had never suffered from insomnia. I watched the location of her car through the family tracking app that was still connected to my phone. She stopped at a private clinic operated by an acquaintance, then visited a pharmacy near the shopping center. That night, I heard her and Noah talking in the kitchen. "Do we really have to go this far?" Noah asked quietly. "If we don't, your sister will leave. Do you want to spend your whole life under her thumb? But if someone finds out—" "No one will. Richard needs us to keep quiet about his involvement with your packet. Once we get photographs, your sister won't dare report for work. Afterward, will she give me money? If she loses the job, she'll have to stay home. I'll make her find work in Hartford and turn her salary over to me. First, we'll use it for your house deposit and your wedding." I stood behind the laundry room door, recording the entire conversation on my phone. Noah's final question severed the last thread of affection I had left for him. He did not care what they were preparing to do to me. He only wanted to know how much money he would receive after they ruined me. 2 days later, Mom entered my room carrying a dark red dress. It was shorter than anything I normally wore, with a plunging neckline and a tight fit. "Uncle Richard is coming to dinner tonight," she said. "He may be able to help Noah get his replacement packet faster." "Wear this." Why should I dress like that to discuss Noah's documents? Mom forced a smile. "You're young. What's wrong with dressing nicely? Richard likes you. If you say a few sweet things, he'll work harder for us. He has a wife. It's only dinner. Don't think badly of people." I took the dress. All right. Mom clearly had not expected me to agree so easily. Her eyes lit up. "That's my good girl. Families are supposed to help one another." I put on the dress, but underneath it I wore a modest camisole and fitted safety shorts. I concealed a small audio recorder in my hair clip, activated the hallway security camera, and positioned a backup phone on a bookshelf in the living room with its camera recording. Earlier, I had photographed the position of every object in the house and told a college friend that if she did not hear from me by midnight, she should call the police. Richard arrived at 7, carrying a bottle of bourbon and a hurriedly purchased bouquet from a gas station. He was tall and heavyset, with hair dyed unnaturally black and a thick gold wedding band on his ring finger. When Mom introduced us, his eyes moved from my face down to my legs and lingered too long to be called polite. "So this is Natalie?" he said with a grin. "It's been a long time. You've grown into a beautiful young woman." I stepped back half a pace, avoiding the hand he tried to place on my shoulder. "Hello, Mr. Hale. Call me Uncle Richard. We're practically family." Noah sat at the dining table, pretending to be anxious about his packet. Richard boasted that he knew someone who had once worked for the Personnel Commission and might be able to move the paperwork to the top. Everything he said was vague, with no concrete promise. Mom, however, kept refilling his glass and praising his influence. After the main course, she brought out 4 cocktails. I watched as she stood with her back to us at the kitchen counter, removed a small packet of powder from her pocket, and poured it into the glass marked by a yellow lemon slice, the marker she always used to identify mine. She had truly done it. Cold swept through my body, but my hands remained steady. When Mom turned away to collect a tray of food, I switched the positions of 2 glasses. The one with the lemon slice went in front of her chair, while the untouched drink went before me. I did not put drugs in her beverage. I merely returned the exact glass she had prepared for her daughter. Mom sat down and, by habit, pushed the lemon-marked glass toward me. "Natalie, drink. Richard brought good liquor. Don't make him feel unwelcome." I picked up the untouched glass. "Then drink with me, Mom." Without suspicion, she raised the glass with the lemon slice and drank nearly half of it. Richard kept pressuring me to drink bourbon. I only touched it to my lips, then discreetly poured some into the potted plant behind me. Meanwhile, Mom's face began to flush. Her voice grew louder, her movements became awkward, and she laughed repeatedly at things that were not funny. Richard was also drinking heavily. At 9, Noah claimed he was meeting friends and left the house, exactly as they had planned. I pretended to feel dizzy and braced a hand against the table. "Mom, I'm not feeling well." Her eyes brightened. "Then go upstairs and rest. Richard, help me take her up." Richard stood so quickly that his chair fell backward. He moved toward me, but Mom was the one who began swaying. She grabbed his arm, giggling and speaking in broken phrases. Richard caught her instinctively. Both lost their balance, collided, and fell onto the sofa together. I stepped back and made sure the phone on the shelf captured the entire scene. I did not allow Richard to take Mom into a bedroom, nor did I create an opportunity for any sexual activity. I only pulled a light blanket over them when they started drifting unconscious, then called Caroline Miller. Caroline had been Mom's closest friend for more than 15 years. She often came to our house for coffee, went with Mom to Christmas markets, and always called Noah the golden boy. Caroline was the one who had introduced Richard to Mom and claimed he could help with Noah's packet. I called her because Golden Daisy's writing sounded remarkably like Caroline's. The repeated phrase, "daughters eventually belong to another family," several identical spelling errors, and far too much knowledge of our schedule. I said over the phone, "Aunt Caroline, I think you need to come to our house right away. Uncle Richard is here with Mom. Neither of them seems normal." Caroline was silent for several seconds before asking in a sharp voice, "Where are they?" "Alone in the living room." She hung up. 15 minutes later, an SUV stopped abruptly in front of the house. Caroline stormed inside without ringing the bell. The moment she saw Richard and Mom lying against each other on the sofa, their clothing disordered from stumbling, she screamed loudly enough for the neighbors across the street to hear. "Margaret, how dare you do this behind my back?" The scream woke Mom. She opened her eyes in a daze, unable to understand why Caroline was there. Richard also struggled upright and called Caroline by the wrong name directly in front of Mom. That single name shattered everything. It turned out Richard and Caroline had been secretly involved for nearly 3 years. Caroline was not his wife, but she considered him her man and had always believed he would divorce his wife for her. Mom knew Richard was married, but she did not know how serious his affair with Caroline was. And Caroline, despite designing the plan through the Golden Daisy account, clearly had not expected Richard to end up lying beside my mother. Caroline lunged forward and grabbed Mom's hair. Half awake and panicked, Mom shoved her away. Richard tried to intervene, but he was so drunk that he fell against the coffee table. I called 911 and reported that 3 adults were fighting and that one of them might have been drugged without consent. While we waited for police, the shouting drew neighbors onto their porches. Several raised their phones and began recording. Noah returned just as the patrol car arrived. He rushed through the door, saw the chaos, and blurted, "Mom, is it done? Did you get pictures of Natalie?" Both officers turned to look at him. Noah went pale at once. "I mean, family pictures." I said nothing. The camera on the bookshelf had captured his question clearly. Paramedics examined Mom and found signs of sedative use combined with alcohol. Because she refused to identify the source of the medication, they took her to the hospital for observation. Richard was also transported because he was severely intoxicated and had a minor injury to his forehead. Police warned Caroline about assault. I gave the officers the video showing Mom putting powder into the drink, but said only that I had noticed something unusual about the glass and avoided drinking it. At that time, I did not mention the practical Mom account. I wanted to preserve the entire chain of evidence until I understood who was behind every piece of advice. The next morning, the house was suffocatingly quiet. Noah avoided me. Mom returned from the hospital with bloodshot eyes and a gray face. She did not ask whether I was all right or explain why there had been drugs in my glass. Her first words were, "You called Caroline?" "Yes." "You deliberately humiliated me." "I called the woman who introduced Richard. You were the one who put drugs in the drink." She stared at me with hatred. "You switched the glasses. So you admit the glass contained medication?" She fell silent. I stepped closer. "What would have happened if I had drunk it? I only wanted you to relax." With a sedative that was not prescribed to me, while a married man waited in the living room, I did everything for this family. "No, you did it for Noah." She raised her hand to slap me, then stopped when she noticed my phone was recording. Her hand trembled in the air before slowly lowering. "Turn it off." "I will never turn it off again." I packed my belongings in a single night. Clothes, my computer, personal documents, and several photographs of Dad went into 2 suitcases. I left the furniture, anything Mom had purchased, and every object she might later use as proof that I owed her. The next morning, I drove to Boston for orientation. A college friend let me stay in her apartment in Somerville while I searched for a room. I changed the passwords for my bank accounts, email, and recruitment portal, disabled family location sharing, and sent every screenshot of the Facebook post to an attorney who offered free consultations through a victim support center. Noah could not join me. His replacement packet was still being processed. Mom sent exactly one message: "Come home and apologize, and I'll pretend none of this happened." I did not reply. For the next 2 weeks, the Facebook post received no updates. Mom and Noah did not call either. The silence brought relief, but it also made me uneasy. They were not people who accepted defeat easily. They were only searching for a larger stage. I began work at the Massachusetts Office of Audit and Compliance. My first days were filled with training sessions, security briefings, ethics rules, and introductions to colleagues. I loved the rhythm of my new life. Each morning, I took the train from Somerville into downtown Boston, bought coffee from a small kiosk near the station, and entered the building using an employee badge bearing my own name. No one knew I was Noah's sister. No one asked me to give up my place, fix someone else's report, or accept responsibility for another person's mistakes. For the first time in my life, my abilities belonged only to me. 2 weeks later, the agency held a welcome ceremony for new employees in the first-floor auditorium. Because I had received the highest score in the entry evaluation, I was chosen to speak on behalf of the group. Standing behind the podium, looking at rows of managers and colleagues, I thought of every night I had studied after work, every practice examination, and the moment Mom had asked where I kept my packet. I had just reached the words, "We commit ourselves to serving the public with integrity," when the piercing sound of a loudspeaker came from the courtyard. "Natalie Brooks is an ungrateful daughter. She starved her mother and destroyed her brother's future." The auditorium fell silent. My hands tightened around the edge of the podium. Through the tall glass doors, I saw a crowd gathering at the entrance. A red banner had been stretched between 2 columns. Natalie Brooks, ungrateful daughter, burned her brother's files, abandoned her elderly mother. Mom and Noah stood in the center. In front of them, a phone mounted on a tripod was broadcasting a live stream. Mom wore a black sweater, her hair deliberately disheveled, her face free of makeup so she would look exhausted. Holding the loudspeaker, she cried as she told viewers that she had raised 2 children alone after her husband died, spent all her savings on my education, and was repaid when I left home after getting a job, sent her no money, and deliberately burned my brother's employment packet so he would be forced to remain home and care for her. Noah stood beside her with a carefully rehearsed expression of pain. "My sister has been jealous of me since childhood," he told the camera. "She didn't want me working at the same agency because she was afraid I would surpass her. She switched the packets and burned mine. Then she ran off to Boston to enjoy herself while our mother fell apart." Comments flooded the live stream too quickly to read. People called me ungrateful, monstrous, and an evil sister. Several colleagues turned toward me. The director seated in the front row frowned. The loudspeaker continued blaring. "How can a government agency hire someone like this? If she has no morals toward her own mother, how can she serve the public?" I had known this day might come. In the rolling case beneath my seat, I always carried a printed copy of the entire Facebook post, backup recordings, and videos from the cameras at home. I handed the microphone to the host. "Please give me a few minutes." The director looked toward the crowd outside, and then at me. "Would you like us to call security?" "I have already asked a colleague to call the police, but before they arrive, I need to make the truth clear. Otherwise, their version will become the only thing people remember." He nodded. I picked up my document case and walked into the lobby. The moment Mom saw me, she stopped crying for 1 second. Triumph flashed across her face before disappearing beneath her look of grief. "Natalie," she called through the loudspeaker, "you finally came out. Kneel down and apologize to your mother and brother." I stopped several steps away. "Did you and Noah really have to take it this far?" She thought I was frightened. She switched off the loudspeaker, leaned close, and spoke quietly enough that only I could hear. "Resign. Come back to Hartford, find work near home, and let me hold your salary. Then I'll delete the live stream and tell everyone it was a misunderstanding. The recorder in my coat pocket was already running. And if I refuse? Her eyes darkened. Then don't blame me for destroying you. She turned back toward the camera and pulled a stack of photographs from her bag. They had been taken on the night Richard came to the house, me in the red dress, holding a glass, standing beside him. The images had been carefully cropped to make us look far more intimate than we had been. "Look at this," Mom shouted. She even seduced a married man, the man who was involved with my closest friend. She lives this shamelessly, and the agency still values her. Whispers spread through the lobby. Noah held one photograph closer to the live stream camera. The comments exploded again. I opened my document case. I wanted to keep family matters within the family, I said. But today, they brought those matters to my workplace, so I will present everything. I handed the director a printed copy of the original Facebook post, along with time-stamped screenshots, archived links, and a lawyer's confirmation that the content had been preserved before deletion. My mother posted this 3 days after my brother and I received our appointment letters. She asked how to stop her daughter from going to work. The comment she pinned said, "Burn her employment packet." Mom lunged forward. "Fake!" She wrote it herself. I stepped back and played a screen recording. In the video, the post updated at the exact time Mom asked where I kept my packet, then described the conversation in my room. The location, timestamps, and private details all matched. The account also wrote that Noah had cried and begged Mom not to let me work at the same agency because he was afraid of living in my shadow. Noah's face reddened. She made that up. I played the recording made after the fire. His voice came through clearly. "You said there wouldn't be any mistakes. You told me you had prepared everything." The crowd began to quiet. I continued. The 2 packets were placed inside identical outer folders. My mother deliberately burned the folder labeled with my name, but Noah's documents were inside. I did not burn anything. The living room camera shows her knocking the candle onto the folder. I handed the video to security, who displayed it on a monitor near the lobby. In the footage, Mom looked around before pushing the candle. Noah sat ready with a towel. After the flames started, both of them created minor injuries exactly as the Facebook post had described. Mom's face turned white. "As for the photographs with Richard Hale," I said, "they were taken during a dinner my mother arranged. This recording was made before that dinner." Mom's voice came from the phone speaker. "You need to entertain Uncle Richard properly. Drink a few glasses. Men like obedient girls. If he enjoys himself, Noah's packet will be handled." Then I played the kitchen conversation between Mom and Noah. "If we don't do this, your sister will leave. Do you want to spend your whole life under her thumb? Afterward, will she give me money? If she loses the job, she'll have to stay home. She'll hand her salary to me. First we'll pay for your house and wedding." Noah lunged to grab the phone. Security stopped him. I looked directly into Mom's livestream camera. That night, my mother put a sedative into the glass marked for me. The camera recorded everything. I noticed before drinking it. She consumed the glass she had prepared herself. Richard was also heavily intoxicated. I did not seduce him. I called emergency services and gave the recording to police. I played the footage of Mom at the kitchen counter, crushing something and pouring it into the lemon-marked glass. The angle did not identify the medication, but there was no harmless explanation for what she had done. For several seconds, the live stream went silent. Then the comments reversed violently. "Wait, she tried to drug her own daughter? This mother was crying while lying to everyone? She burned the son's packet by mistake and now blames the daughter. Call the police." Mom charged toward me. Ungrateful child! I gave birth to you. I have the right to discipline you. I moved aside. Giving birth to me does not mean you own my life. Noah shouted. You ruined me. If you hadn't switched the folders, my documents wouldn't have burned. And if the two of you had not tried to burn mine, no packet would have burned. He had no answer. I turned to the director. I apologize that this happened at the agency. I submitted some of the evidence to an attorney in advance and will cooperate fully with human resources. I am not asking anyone to believe me merely because I am the one standing here. I am asking you to examine the data, the timestamps, and the original recordings. At that moment, 2 police cars stopped in front of the building. Officers entered and ordered Mom and Noah to end the live stream. One of them had reviewed the earlier report about the dinner with Richard and recognized my mother's name. Margaret Brooks and Noah Brooks, the officer said. We need you to come to the station and assist with an investigation involving harassment, distribution of false allegations, property destruction, and a conspiracy to administer medication not prescribed to another person. Noah immediately pointed at Mom. It was all her idea. I didn't buy the drugs. I only did what she told me. Mom spun toward him. You were the one who begged me to stop your sister. I only said I didn't want to work with her. I never told you to burn the packet. They began arguing in front of the camera. Every sentence contradicted the last and accidentally confirmed another part of the plan. The officers had to separate them. As they led her away, Mom looked back and shouted, Natalie, if you don't withdraw your complaint, I will no longer consider you my daughter. I looked at her, surprised that the threat no longer hurt. I stopped being your daughter the moment you decided to burn my future. The police car door closed. After the patrol cars left, the building lobby remained silent. The people who had gathered did not know whether to look at me or at one another. The red banner had been abandoned on the sidewalk, one end sagging into a puddle. Mom's phone was still attached to its tripod, comments continuing to move across the screen until a security officer ended the live stream. The director, Daniel Foster, asked me to join him in a small conference room with a human resources representative and the agency's legal counsel. I expected to tremble, but once I sat down, I felt only exhaustion. Tension had held my body upright for hours. Now that the immediate danger had passed, all my strength seemed to drain away. I explained everything in chronological order. The first Facebook post, Mom's question about the packet, my decision to switch only the outer folders, the fire, the dinner with Richard, the drugged glass, the security footage, and the live stream. I did not hide the fact that I had used the Practical Mom account to test whether Mom was willing to obtain medication. The legal advisor questioned that part carefully because it could make my actions appear improper. I did not buy any medication, give medication to her, or ask for a particular drug, I said. I left a cruel comment to test my mother's limit. I know that was not a wise decision, but when I saw that she actually went looking for pills, I began recording everything and prepared to contact police. At dinner, I saw her pour powder into the glass marked for me. I moved the 2 glasses before she brought them to the table. She picked up that glass herself and drank it. I did not force her. The lawyer took notes and said police would need to identify the exact substance, its source, and the complete sequence of conduct. He did not promise that I would face no scrutiny, but the camera footage showing Mom independently preparing and administering the drug was important evidence. Human Resources placed me on 3 days of paid leave so I could recover. They temporarily restricted my access to several systems, not because they had decided I was guilty, but because it was standard procedure when an employee became involved in a public investigation. I understood. After everything that had happened, being evaluated through a process rather than emotion felt like a profound kindness. I spent most of those 3 days sleeping. My friend Rachel placed a spare key on the table and told me I could stay in her apartment as long as necessary. She did not ask why I had failed to recognize Mom's favoritism sooner. She did not advise me to forgive because she is still your mother. Rachel made soup, left headache medicine beside the bed, and sat with me while my phone filled with messages from strangers. Clips from the live stream were cut into pieces and spread across social media. In the first minutes, viewers saw only a crying mother and a daughter standing coldly, so they attacked me viciously. Once the recordings and security footage became public, opinion reversed. Some people apologized. Many shared stories of parents who favored sons, used filial duty to control money, and forced daughters to surrender opportunities. I did not read much of it. I had learned that a crowd could reverse itself within minutes. Their sympathy could be comforting, but I did not want to build my new life on recognition from strangers. The investigation lasted nearly 4 months. It was neither quick nor tidy, unlike the way legal consequences appeared in edited online videos. Police seized Mom's and Noah's phones and interviewed Richard, Caroline, the neighbors, and medical personnel. The pharmacy confirmed that Mom had used a sedative prescription issued to an elderly relative, not to her. The home camera showed her crushing the tablets and adding them to the drink. The hospital test results from that night were consistent with the same drug. Mom tried to explain that she only wanted to help me relax because I was stressed before starting work. But messages between her and Noah clearly showed that the purpose was to reduce my ability to resist Richard. Although the Facebook post had been made through an anonymous account, login data connected it to our home Wi-Fi network and Mom's phone. At first, Noah denied everything. He claimed he had never known Mom intended to burn my packet or drug me. Police found his messages. Mom, remember to make it look accidental. Natalie is suspicious. Another message sent after the fire read, why didn't you check properly? You ruined everything. Before the dinner with Richard, he had asked, if it works, will Natalie have to quit immediately? When he realized the messages could not be erased, Noah shifted all responsibility onto Mom. He said she had manipulated him since childhood, constantly planting the belief that I stole everything from him and that he only wanted to be recognized once. Some of that may have been true. Mom had indulged him and poisoned his self-esteem for years. But Noah was 25. He understood the consequences when he begged her to destroy my career. He knew there might be drugs in the drink. He still left the house so the plan could proceed, then returned and asked whether they had obtained photographs. His childhood explained his behavior. It did not erase responsibility. The Massachusetts Personnel Commission had been preparing to reissue Noah's packet and place him in the next orientation group. If he and Mom had arrived at my agency one day later, he might already have received official confirmation. But after the live stream, the commission opened an ethics review. Deliberately spreading false information, disrupting a state facility, threatening an employee, and participating in a plan to destroy another candidate's documents caused Noah to be removed from the program. He called me from an unfamiliar number after receiving the decision. Natalie, withdraw your statement, he said the moment I answered. If you tell them I didn't know anything, they may reconsider. Why should I lie? Because I'm your brother. I was silent for several seconds. That sentence had followed me my entire life. Because he was my brother, I had to give way. Because he was my brother, I had to care for him. Because he was my brother, I had to care for him the consequences. But when he wanted to destroy my future, the fact that I was his sister had never made him stop. It hurts this much precisely because you are my brother, I said. But I will not lie to save you from consequences you created yourself. He began to cry, then switched to insults. He called me cruel, said Dad would have been disappointed if he were alive, and claimed Mom was going to prison because of me. I listened until he ran out of words, then ended the call and blocked the number. Mom was charged with administering prescription medication with intent to cause harm, conspiracy to coerce, destruction of property, and harassment. Because she had no criminal record and no physical assault had ultimately been committed against me, her sentence was not as long as many people online demanded. But her refusal to accept responsibility, continued attempts to blame me, and efforts to pressure me into reconciliation prevented the court from granting the lightest disposition. She served a term of imprisonment, followed by supervision, and a no-contact order protecting me. I refused mediation. Several relatives called to say Mom was getting older, that raising us alone had been difficult, and that no one is perfect. I asked them one question. If I had drunk that glass and awakened beside Richard, would they have told me I was imperfect, and therefore my mother had to forgive me? No one answered. Richard lost his consulting contracts after his company learned what happened. His wife filed for divorce. He tried to claim he was also a victim because he did not know Mom intended to use drugs, but the recording showed that he agreed to help make Natalie more affectionate in exchange for assisting Noah. He was not convicted of offenses as serious as Mom's, but his reputation and family collapsed. The greatest surprise was Golden Daisy's identity. Police traced the account data to Caroline Miller, Mom's closest friend. She had encouraged the destruction of the packet, suggested using Richard, and repeatedly pushed Mom farther. When asked why, Caroline said she had initially wanted to teach Margaret a lesson because Mom constantly bragged about her talented daughter, her son's promising job, and her happy family. Caroline had lived for years with a sense of inferiority. She was also jealous because Richard often praised me for being young and intelligent. She wanted Mom's relationship with her daughter destroyed, wanted our family thrown into chaos, and wanted to use me to test Richard's loyalty. In other words, she had turned 3 people's lives into an experiment for her own jealousy. When Mom learned that Caroline was Golden Daisy, they argued furiously in the interview room. Mom accused Caroline of deliberately pushing her into prison. Caroline laughed and said no one had forced her to burn the packet or drug me. Every decision had been her own. For the first time, Mom had to face the truth that however vicious another person's advice might be, she had chosen to act because the desire already existed within her. Caroline's family also fell apart when her husband learned about the affair with Richard. Their argument nearly became violent, forcing police to intervene again. I received those updates through my lawyer, but felt no satisfaction. It was only a field of wreckage created by greed, jealousy, and the habit of treating relatives as tools. 3 months after the live stream, the agency completed its internal investigation and formally confirmed that I had not violated professional ethics. The notice did not describe my private life. It stated only that the public allegations were false and that I had cooperated fully. My system access was restored. I returned to training and completed everything I had missed. On my first day back, I entered the office feeling as though everyone knew too much about me. Some colleagues avoided the subject. Others said they had believed me from the beginning, though I was not sure that was true. Only Maria, who sat at the desk across from mine, set a cup of coffee beside my keyboard and said, "Here, you don't have to take care of anyone except your own responsibilities. If you need help, ask. Don't carry everything alone." The simple words brought heat to my eyes. I was used to helping others but did not know how to accept help. Over the following months, I had to relearn many things: how to say no without a long explanation, how to keep money for myself, how to rest when I was sick, and how to understand that love was not measured by how much pain I could endure. I rented a small studio in Quincy, 1 train ride from the agency. It had only 1 main room, a window overlooking a parking lot, and a kitchen so narrow that opening the refrigerator blocked half the walkway. But the key belonged to me. No one searched the drawers, inspected my paycheck, or asked how much money I had transferred to Noah. I placed a photograph of Dad on the bookshelf. In it, he carried both of us on his shoulders at an autumn fair. Noah and I were 6, laughing so hard our eyes were closed. Some nights, I looked at that photograph and wondered whether things would have been different if Dad had lived. Perhaps he would have stopped Mom. Perhaps he had become so accustomed to her favoritism that he would not have recognized how far it had gone. I would never know. What I did know was that I could no longer live according to a version of family that existed only in memory. Almost a year later, my lawyer forwarded a letter Mom had sent from prison. She wrote that her health was poor, that the other inmates treated her coldly, and that she missed the soup I used to make when she was sick. She did not apologize for the packet. She did not mention the glass. She did not admit the plan involving Richard. She only said she had done everything out of concern for the family and asked how a daughter could be so heartless. I finished reading, folded the letter, and placed it in the evidence envelope. I did not respond. Noah stopped looking for me after our final call. I heard that he moved through several short-term jobs and still told people his sister had destroyed his career. Perhaps that version made his life easier. If he admitted the truth, he would have to accept that the opportunity had been in his hands and that his own jealousy caused him to lose it. I no longer wanted to correct the way he told the story. 2 years later, I was promoted to senior compliance specialist. On the day I received the decision, I bought a small apple pie from the bakery near the station, carried it home, and placed it in front of Dad's photograph. I did not hold a large celebration. I sat beside the window, looked at the city lights, and remembered the night I first saw Mom's Facebook post. If I had scrolled past it, if I had handed over the packet without checking, my life might have turned in a completely different direction. But what saved me was not only the luck of seeing the post. It was the moment I chose to trust my own uneasiness, instead of continuing to believe that relatives could never truly harm me. From childhood, I had been taught that family was the place where forgiveness had to be unconditional. Now I understood that family only had meaning when its members respected one another's existence and choices. Blood was not a license to destroy someone's future, use their money or body, and then demand silence in the name of filial duty. Mom and Noah were no longer part of my life. I did not ask whether they were happy or miserable, rich or poor. I did not wish further misfortune on them. The consequences they received were enough, and my peace did not need to be built on their suffering. I simply chose another road. Every morning, I locked my own apartment door, carried my employee badge, and boarded the train into Boston. I did the work I had fought to earn, used my salary for my own life, and returned to a place where no one waited to demand another sacrifice. We had once been 3 people living beneath the same roof, convinced that no matter how badly we hurt one another, none of us could ever leave. In the end, they taught me that some relationships survive only because one person keeps enduring. When that person stops enduring, the relationship ends. From then on, each of us followed a separate road. No hatred, no returning, and no more using the word family as permission to invade another person's life. And for the first time in 25 years, I was truly living a life that belonged to me.